Imagine a hidden part of the internet where no one knows your identity, where your name, your location, your face, none of it exists, where transactions happen in digital currency, and entire marketplaces rise and fall like empires. You've probably heard the term before, maybe in a news headline, maybe in a conversation that made you lean in a little closer. The dark web. Just saying it out loud carries a certain weight, doesn't it? Today, on War and Web Mystery, we're going to pull back the curtain on what the dark web really is, not what movies want you to believe, not what clickbait headlines scream at you, but the real, documented, carefully reported truth. And trust us, the truth is far more fascinating than the fiction. Let's start at the beginning. Most people think the internet is one single thing. You open a browser, you type something in, you get results. Simple. But what you're seeing, every website, every article, every social media post, that's only a fraction of what actually exists online. Think of the internet like an ocean. The surface is what you can see from a boat. The websites Google shows you, the news you read, the videos you watch, that's the surface web. It's indexed, it's searchable, anyone can find it. But beneath that surface, there's something far larger and far deeper. That's called the deep web. And here's where most people get confused. The deep web is not dangerous. It's not mysterious. It's actually completely normal. Your email inbox is part of the deep web. Your online banking portal is part of the deep web. Your medical records, your Netflix watch history, your company's internal files, all of it lives in the deep web. It's simply content that isn't indexed by search engines. It requires a login, a password, a direct link. That's it. Nothing sinister about it. In fact, experts estimate the deep web makes up somewhere between 90 and 95% of the entire internet. That's how vast it is. Most of what you do online every single day is technically part of the deep web, and you never even think about it. Now, go deeper. Past the login pages, past the private databases, past the corporate intranets and government archives. Keep going. And eventually, you reach something else entirely. A layer that doesn't just require a password. It requires a completely different kind of technology just to access it. This is the dark web. It's a small subset of the deep web, but it operates differently. To even visit a dark website, you typically need special software, most commonly the Tor browser. Tor, which stands for the Onion Router, was originally developed by the United States Naval Research Laboratory in the mid-1990s as a tool to protect intelligence communications. It works by bouncing your connection through multiple encrypted relays around the world, peeling away identity like layers of an onion until your original location is nearly impossible to trace. Dark websites don't end in .com or .org. They use a special suffix, .onion, and they can only be accessed through Tor or similar anonymizing networks. This is not something you accidentally stumble into. It requires intention. It requires specific tools. And it exists in a world that most people will never see. Now, let's explore what really happens behind those encrypted doors. Because the reality is more complex than most people expect. Yes, the dark web has been used for illegal activity. That part is real and well documented. But it has also been used by journalists, dissidents, activists, whistleblowers, and ordinary people living in countries where the open internet is censored or surveilled. In authoritarian regimes, people use Tor and the dark web simply to read uncensored news, to communicate safely, or to reach out to human rights organizations. The BBC, the New York Times, and other major news organizations have launched dark web versions of their own websites, specifically so that people in restrictive countries can access free information. So before we go any further, understand this. The dark web itself is a tool. Like any tool, it can be used for good or for harm. What matters is the hand that holds it. But let's talk about the harm, because it is real. And the most infamous story in the history of the dark web begins with a man named Ross Ulbricht at a marketplace called Silk Road. Some stories seem unbelievable, but they were reported by authorities and covered extensively in court records and public FBI filings. Silk Road launched in 2011. It was, in essence, an online marketplace, but one where the primary product was illegal drugs. Operating entirely on the dark web, accessible only through Tor, Silk Road used Bitcoin as its currency long before most people had even heard of cryptocurrency. At its peak, it was generating millions of dollars in transactions every month. Vendors from around the world listed products. Buyers left reviews. There was even a customer service system. It looked structurally like a very polished online store, except everything being sold was illegal. The FBI described it as the most sophisticated criminal marketplace they had ever encountered at the time. For nearly 2.5 years, Silk Road operated in what its founder believed was perfect anonymity. But anonymity is rarely perfect. In October 2013, FBI agents arrested Ross Ulbricht in a San Francisco public library. He was sitting at his laptop, logged in as the site's administrator. Silk Road was shut down. Ulbricht was later convicted on multiple charges, including drug trafficking and money laundering, and sentenced to life in prison without parole. The empire had fallen. But the story didn't end there. Within months, new marketplaces had appeared. Alphabay, Hansa, Dream Market. The pattern repeated itself again and again. Authorities would shut one down. Another would rise. According to public statements by Europol and the FBI, this cycle continued throughout the 2010s, with law enforcement agencies conducting coordinated international operations to dismantle these platforms one by one. Operation Bayonet in 2017 simultaneously took down Alphabay and Hansa in a sophisticated sting that made headlines worldwide. The lesson law enforcement kept repeating was the same one the dark web kept proving. No system is truly anonymous forever. Let's talk about data, because not everything on the dark web involves drugs or weapons. Some of the most common and most impactful criminal activity happening there right now is something far quieter. Data breaches. When a major company gets hacked, and it happens more often than you might think, the stolen information doesn't just disappear, it ends up somewhere. And very often, that somewhere is the dark web. According to reports by IBM security and cybersecurity firms like Recorded Future, massive databases of stolen credentials, usernames, passwords, email addresses, credit card numbers, are regularly bought and sold on dark web forums. In 2019, a breach involving a major financial institution exposed over 100 million customer records. Cybersecurity researchers found portions of that data being traded within weeks on dark web marketplaces. In another widely reported case, stolen login credentials from a major entertainment streaming service appeared for sale in dark web listings, bundled by the thousands for just a few cents per account. The people buying these aren't master criminals in hooded rooms. They're opportunists. They're looking for easy access to accounts they can exploit: streaming, banking, email, social media. According to the FTC, identity theft cases in the United States have surged dramatically over the past decade, and a significant portion traced back to credentials that were originally exposed in data breaches and later traded on the dark web. The FTC reported that consumers lost over $10 billion to fraud in 2023 alone, a record-breaking figure. The pipeline from a corporate data breach to a real person's stolen identity often runs directly through the dark web. And then there's phishing. Let's talk about how ordinary people get caught in webs they never even knew existed. Imagine you receive an email that looks exactly like it's from your bank. The logo is correct. The formatting looks official. It tells you there's been suspicious activity on your account and asks you to click a link and verify your information. You click. You type in your username and password. And within minutes, someone on the other side of the world, or in the same city, has access to your account. That's phishing. And according to public reports by the FTC and cybersecurity organizations like the Anti-Phishing Working Group, phishing remains one of the most effective and widespread forms of cybercrime in the world. Where does the dark web come in? The infrastructure behind phishing campaigns, the stolen email lists, the fake website templates, the tools used to harvest credentials, much of it is bought, sold, and traded in dark web forms. There are entire dark web communities dedicated to sharing phishing kits, coaching new cybercriminals, and trading the results. It's an underground economy with its own supply chains, its own vendors, its own quality ratings, and the people running it are not always who you'd imagine. In multiple documented cases, individuals arrested for cybercrime operations had no prior criminal records. Some were college students. Some were middle-aged professionals with day jobs. The dark web lowered the barrier to entry for cybercrime in ways that law enforcement has described as unprecedented. Now, let's talk about the myths, because for every real story on the dark web, there are 100 fabricated ones, and some of them have taken on a life of their own. The most persistent myth is the Red Room. You've probably heard of it. The story goes that somewhere on the dark web, there are live-streamed videos of torture and murder, where viewers pay to watch and even vote on what happens to the victim. It sounds horrifying. It's also almost certainly fictional. Every credible cybersecurity researcher who has investigated Red Room claims has come away finding nothing. No verified evidence. No law enforcement reports. No documented prosecutions. The technical reality is that live streaming high-quality video over the Tor network is extremely difficult. Tor is slow by design. Because routing traffic through multiple encrypted relays takes time, the bandwidth required for reliable live streaming would make it functionally impossible at the scale these myths describe. Organizations like Snopes and cybersecurity journalists at publications like Wired and Vice's Motherboard have repeatedly debunked Red Room claims, tracing many of them back to creepypasta fiction forums and viral social media posts. The myth persists because it taps into something deep in human psychology, the fear of what we can't see. But the evidence simply isn't there. Another common myth is that you can easily make large amounts of money on the dark web through hacking, scams, or other illicit means. This narrative gets circulated constantly, especially in certain online communities. The reality, as documented in reports by cybersecurity firms and law enforcement, is very different. For every person who made significant money through dark web criminal activity, there are dozens who were scammed, dozens more who were caught, and many who simply failed. Exit scams, where dark web marketplace operators vanish overnight with all the funds held in escrow, are extraordinarily common. In 2019, a well-known dark web marketplace called Wall Street Market pulled what's known as an exit scam, reportedly making off with millions of dollars in cryptocurrency before disappearing. The people who lost money were the very criminals who had trusted the platform. The dark web has its own predators eating other predators. It is not a shortcut to wealth. It is, far more often, a shortcut to prosecution, financial loss, or both. There's also the myth that visiting the dark web will immediately compromise your device or expose you to criminal liability. Simply accessing the dark web using legal tools like the Tor Browser is not illegal in the United States or most Western countries. Journalists, researchers, and cybersecurity professionals do it regularly as part of their work. The legal exposure comes from what you do once you're there. Accessing illegal content, purchasing illegal goods, participating in criminal forms, those activities carry serious legal consequences. But curiosity alone is not a crime. Understanding the distinction is important because fear and misinformation about the dark web often prevent people from learning the real lessons it has to teach about privacy, security, and the vulnerabilities of our digital lives. So what can you actually do to protect yourself? Let's get practical. Because even if you never visit the dark web yourself, your personal data may already be there, and you should know how to respond. The first thing every person should do is check whether their email address has appeared in a known data breach. A free tool called Have I Been Pwned, maintained by cybersecurity researcher Troy Hunt, allows anyone to enter their email and see immediately whether it has appeared in publicly disclosed breaches. If it has, change the passwords associated with that account immediately. Do not reuse passwords across multiple sites. This is one of the most common ways a single breach cascades into multiple account compromises. Use a password manager if remembering unique passwords for every account feels overwhelming. There are excellent options available, both free and paid, that make this manageable. The second thing is to enable multi-factor authentication wherever possible. Even if someone has your password, multi-factor authentication means they also need a second piece of verification, usually a code sent to your phone, before they can access your account. According to Microsoft's internal security reports, multi-factor authentication blocks over 99% of automated account compromise attacks. That one step can make an enormous difference. Third, be vigilant about phishing. According to the FTC, the best defense against phishing is a moment of deliberate skepticism. Before clicking any link in an email, ask yourself, did I expect this email? Does the sender address actually match the organization it claims to be from? Does the link in the email go to the correct website address? When in doubt, go directly to the organization's official website by typing the address yourself rather than clicking any link. Fourth, monitor your financial accounts regularly. Set up alerts for unusual transactions. If your credit card company or bank allows it, enable notifications for every transaction so that any unauthorized use is flagged immediately. The faster you catch fraud, the easier it is to reverse. And fifth, consider placing a credit freeze with the three major credit bureaus: Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. A credit freeze prevents new lines of credit from being opened in your name without your explicit authorization, which is one of the most effective protections against identity theft. Now let's step back for a moment. Let's think about something deeper. Why are we so fascinated by the dark web in the first place? Because the fascination is real. Articles about the dark web consistently rank among the most read content in technology journalism. Documentaries about cybercrime draw massive audiences. True crime podcasts that touch on hacking and the dark web have millions of subscribers. What is it about this hidden digital underworld that grips the human imagination so completely? Part of it is the same instinct that makes people slow down on highways when they pass accidents. We are wired to pay attention to danger. Our brains evolved in environments where ignoring a threat could be fatal, and that instinct hasn't disappeared just because we now live in a digital age. The dark web represents danger in a form that feels simultaneously near and unreachable. It's in our devices, theoretically accessible to anyone with the right software, and yet most of us will never actually venture there. That combination of proximity and distance is psychologically potent, but there's something else too. The dark web represents a challenge to the idea that the world is transparent, knowable, and controlled. We live in an age of unprecedented surveillance. Corporations track our every click. Governments monitor communications. Algorithms predict our behavior. The dark web is a reminder that there are still corners of human activity that resist observation. For some people, that's terrifying. For others, it's strangely thrilling. It represents the possibility of genuine anonymity in a world that has made privacy increasingly rare. Psychologists who study digital behavior have noted that the dark web occupies a similar role in the cultural imagination as secret societies once did, a hidden world with its own rules, operating just out of sight of the mainstream. The difference is that this secret world is real, documented, and has had genuine, measurable effects on millions of people's lives, and it's only going to become more relevant. Let's look at where things are heading. Cybercrime is not slowing down. According to Cybersecurity Ventures, global cybercrime costs are projected to reach trillions of dollars annually in the coming years, making it one of the most significant economic threats in the world. The tools of cybercrime are becoming more sophisticated, more automated, and more accessible. Artificial intelligence is increasingly being used not just by defenders, but by attackers, generating more convincing phishing emails, automating credential stuffing attacks, and creating deepfake content used in fraud schemes. At the same time, law enforcement capabilities are also advancing. Blockchain analysis, the ability to trace cryptocurrency transactions, has become remarkably sophisticated. The FBI and other agencies have repeatedly demonstrated the ability to follow cryptocurrency trails that criminals believed were untraceable, recovering seized funds and identifying suspects. In 2021, the Department of Justice announced the recovery of over $4 billion in cryptocurrency linked to the original Silk Road hack, the largest financial seizure in DOJ history at that point. The message from law enforcement has been consistent. Digital footprints are rarely as invisible as people believe. Privacy tools like Tor reduce traceability, but they don't eliminate it. Human behavior, operational mistakes, and the complexity of moving money in a world with increasing financial surveillance create vulnerabilities that investigators can and do exploit. The future of the dark web will also be shaped by ongoing debates about encryption, privacy, and government surveillance. In the United States and Europe, there are recurring legislative discussions about whether governments should have the ability to access encrypted communications. Privacy advocates argue that weakening encryption would make everyone less secure. Law enforcement agencies argue that strong encryption is increasingly being used as a shield by criminals and terrorists. This debate has no easy answers, and it's one that will play out over the coming years in legislatures, courts, and public discourse. Where it lands will shape the digital landscape, including the dark web, in profound ways. What's clear is that understanding this world is not optional anymore. Whether you're a business owner worried about your customers' data, a parent trying to protect your children online, a professional handling sensitive information, or simply a curious person trying to make sense of the digital world, the dark web is part of the ecosystem you live in. Pretending it doesn't exist, or writing it off as purely the domain of criminals and conspiracy theories, leaves you less prepared for the real risks it presents, and less equipped to understand the real debates about privacy and security that affect all of us. So here we are. You came in perhaps knowing little more than a name, the dark web, and maybe a vague sense of unease. Hopefully you're leaving with something more useful. A clearer picture of what the deep web actually is and why it's mundane. An understanding of how the dark web operates and why it was built. The real stories, Silk Road, data breaches, phishing operations, documented by authorities and covered by journalists, stripped of exaggeration. The myths, red rooms, easy money, immediate danger, examined and debunked. Practical steps you can take right now to protect your data and your identity, and a sense of the larger forces shaping this hidden corner of the internet and why they matter. The internet has always had layers. It was built that way. And as long as humans seek privacy, freedom, and sometimes exploitation, those layers will remain. The question has never been whether hidden spaces will exist. The question is whether we understand them well enough to protect ourselves, to make informed decisions, and to participate in the conversations that will determine how this technology is governed. At War and Web Mystery, that's exactly what we're here to help you do. One documented, carefully researched story at a time. Next episode, we're going inside something that affects far more people than Silk Road ever did. We're talking about ransomware, the cyber weapon that has shut down hospitals, crippled city governments, and extorted billions of dollars from organizations across the world. We'll tell you how it works, who's behind it, what the FBI's response has looked like, and most importantly, what you need to know to protect yourself. It's a story that's happening right now, in real time, and it is one you cannot afford to miss. Stay with us on War and Web Mystery.